Hello and welcome to today's video, continuing on with my Monteverde Mania March. Really enjoying looking at a bunch of really lovely Monteverde inks at the moment. Today we're looking at two inks, and it is they're permanent inks, the documental inks, the black here and the blue. These are, as they suggest, document inks, so good for archive, permanency, all that kind of stuff. They're designed not to fade, to have water resistance, all of those kinds of things. Obviously, in the time frame of reviewing these inks, I can't test fading, but I can test the water resistance, and let's have a look at them. So these are the two inks on colouring cards. You can see documental black. It's not super black. It's got a very grey tone to it. It goes on very black and then dries grey. In a way, it reminds me of Monteverde Smoke, how it sort of, from the Noir series, Smoke Noir, how it goes on very, very dark and then dries grey. This kind of does a similar thing. Documental blue has a bit of sheen to it. I think it's a very, very nice blue, sort of stock standard blue. But let's see how these inks actually perform on paper. As we're looking at two inks today, it's a slightly different setup, but we've got the documental inks black and blue here. You can see, I don't know, see how it's going to come up in this light, but there's quite a bit of sheen on the blue in the writing as well. Let's talk about the 5 points. So firstly, these are permanent inks, water resistance, waterproof, whatever you want to call them. I've said permanent because nothing is truly permanent in this life. But this is what they're designed to be, and we're going to see them, I've put them under some water and bleach tests. There are some cleaning issues with this ink. Now, this doesn't mean that these inks stain. I haven't found staining. Your mileage may vary, and if you have found that these inks stain, please put it in the comments below, because the pens I've tried it in, it hasn't stained the converters or anything like that. But it does have some cleaning issues because the nature of these inks, they are designed to be permanent. So like once they dry, they're a little harder to clean, particularly. Made in Austria, Monteverde inks are all made in Europe and then packaged in the US. They are pigment-based inks. So meaning that there's two sorts of permanent ink, or two main sorts of permanent ink. The pigment-based inks that sort of, basically it means that it's not dye, it's pigment, so you've got little bits of stuff in the ink, and it dries on the surface and attaches itself to the surface of the paper, as opposed to like seeping into the paper and attaching itself that way. The last thing I said is they're safe for fountain pens, meaning that you can use them in your fountain pens. You may want to avoid using them in things like your vintage pens with like latex sacks and things like that. But for standard cartridge converter pens, for basic sort of vac fillers, things like that. Vac fillers maybe if you're dicey on the cleaning, but for standard pens, it shouldn't be too much of a problem. As I said, I haven't found staining in the Twisbys and things like that I've had them in over the last little while. So performance, so slower dry time on both of these. You can see after 2 seconds and after 20, you're still fairly wet. And to put that into comparison here, just flip back to Capri Blue, the Monteverde ink I last reviewed, and you can see that the dry time, it does dry considerably more in the 20 seconds. Like these are basically as wet as when I put them down on the page after 20 seconds. So there is a slightly slower dry time, even though they are, I've seen them promoted as drying fast. I can't see that. On lower end paper, like you'll see like the student notepad paper, things like that, it does dry quicker, but that's because the paper just absorbs the ink. On things like Tomoe River and Rhodia, the dry time is slower. Okay, so the black is not a super dark black. I have said that. Like, it is not the blackest black. I'll come back to a color comparison in a second. Stands up to water and bleach, which we'll see in a second, and fair performance on lower end paper. The blue, I said it's a lovely vibrant blue, not quite a royal blue, but like in that kind of family, with some really nice sheen. Good water and bleach resistance, some movement. So more than the black, I find that with a little bit of water, so this is just a crosshatch, and then I've hit it with like a standard sort of water brush pen. moved it around a bit, you can see it takes a little bit off the surface because it's, as I said, it's not these permanent inks that like seep into the paper, like say the Detrimentus inks do and some of the noodlers. This is one of those ones that sits on the surface, and therefore you can move a little bit of the pigment around a little bit. But you can see very strong, you know, water. It's absolutely legible. Let's look at it on some other paper now, starting at the bottom and working our way up. I have it here on student notepad paper. So I've just written one line and then done another little water thing there. You can see this is where it dries very, very quickly because it absorbs into the paper. And we do get that, which is the nature of the paper. It's a very loose weave paper, these very flimsy student notepad papers. And you can see on the reverse, there is a fair bit of sort of bleed and there's a little bit of feather, but this is not fountain pen friendly paper, and these are by nature slightly aggressive inks by the nature of the fact that they are permanent. Here on the printer paper, it holds a little tighter, which you would expect. Once again, moves around just a tiny bit on the surface there, and on the reverse there's a bit of bleed, but I don't think it's sort of too bad considering what the ink is designed to be. If we then look on Rhodia here, I've done another swab there because I think like picking up some of that sheen on the blue, I'm not sure if it's coming up at all under this light. It's a mixture of natural and LED light. So we do sort of, you have to hit the right mark to get some of that sheen. But it holds beautifully, and I think the colors look really good. They look solid, not super black once again, but it's not a super black ink. And then if we look at the reverse of this page, we see nothing has come through. Even like with the swabs, there's very little that actually makes its way through the paper. So on good quality paper, these inks are very, very nice indeed. Now, here is my test page. What I've done is I've taken the Documental inks here and then partnered them with another standard or core run Monteverde ink, so a non-permanent ink. Starting with the black, we see Documental Black is definitely lighter in color. But when it comes to performance against water and bleach, we see it stands up. Absolutely, like I hit that with bleach, you can see where it's sort of yellowed. No, you know, you can absolutely rely on this ink. It's very, very good. I'm not saying it's the best permanent black, but I think it's actually, I think that performs pretty well. I'm quite happy with that. As opposed to say Midnight Black here, which with the bleach is basically completely eradicated apart from that sort of yellow-orange line, and it moves around so much with the water. Now looking at the blue, I used Monteverde Horizon Blue, which is a little bit more vibrant, a little bit more light, but it's the blue of theirs that I have in my collection. You can see that the Documental ink with the water does move around quite a lot. Like it takes a lot of, I think it's there is quite a lot of saturation to the actual pigment in this ink. So it does move around a little bit, but both with water and bleach, it holds up very, very well, as opposed to Horizon Blue, which like you can't make out either of them really. And that ink just moves like it. That's actually quite beautiful, the Horizon Blue, the way that's reacted with the water. And with the bleach, it's basically been completely eradicated. Looking at the reverse of the page once again just to see it, like it does a really, really nice job. I think that on the permanent or waterproof end of these, I'm quite happy with how these go. Blue, it does move around a bit. That's the only thing. Let's look at little color comparisons now for these inks, just to put them into context of where they sit. I chose another permanent black simply because I had it on hand here, and it's Platinum Carbon Ink Black. You can see it is a much darker black. It's hard in this light because it's quite shiny, but you see sort of here, as opposed to this sort of black, it is definitely, Monteverde is a grayer black. And then I chose Waterman's Serenity Blue, which actually color-wise matches up really nicely, as with the sheen. Of course, Waterman's Serenity Blue is not at all waterproof, and Documental Blue is. So if you're after that kind of ink with some water resistance, this may not be a terrible sort of option. So what does this ink cost? Well, The 30ml bottles are $10 US or $12.95 Australian from a couple of the retailers I looked at. So super good value. These are glass bottles with metal cap, which I prefer the metal cap. I find it to be just a little bit more secure than the plastic caps. Yes, they come in these horrible plastic boxes, but we won't go into that again. I'm sure I will again at some point in March, just because I think it's actually a valid point. Like, we don't want plastic, and they actually kind of suck. I shouldn't say that, but they do. Yeah, so the documental inks are good value. Monteverde inks in general are really good value. I think at $10 US for the bottle or $12.95, it puts them in a very good place in the market. So how have I scored these two inks? Well, I've scored the black 4 out of 5. And the only reason it drops down is because it is not super black. I think people who are looking for archival inks in a black probably would prefer something that is a little more sort of solid black if you're using this for artwork. In fact, these are two permanent inks I probably would be hesitant to use with watercolors and things. I know a lot of people like sketch in an ink and then watercolor over the top. These move around just a little bit, just enough to make them awkward if that is what you were doing. But for archival use, for insurance against bleach and things like that, these are good. So 4.5 for the black and 4.5 out of 5 for the blue. That gets us like the only thing that this ink for me, the only issue is, once again, that movement of the ink. I think it performs well. There are some cleaning things, but you expect that with permanent inks. You are not buying inks that are easily cleaned, washed out, low saturation. You are buying an ink because it is a document ink. It's for archival. It's permanent. So, like, that's what you're getting, and you actually do get that. As I said, as I showed, bleach and water, you can absolutely make these out. Like, the bleach does nothing to these inks, really. So, very happy. So these were the two, the Documental Black and Documental Blue inks from Monteverde. I hope you found this video interesting and useful. If you did, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notifications button if you want to stay up to date with the videos that I produce, and please feel free to get in touch using any of the platforms listed below. If you've got products you think I should be looking at, or if there is a way you would like to support the channel by sponsoring a review or providing an item for review, I would love to hear from you. A big thank you to Monteverde and its Australian affiliates for the support of this channel by providing some of the inks for this month of Monteverde reviews for review. Your support is really appreciated. It makes this channel possible, so thank you so much. Thank you, my lovely audience, for watching and engaging and commenting and all those kinds of things. Enjoy your inks, enjoy writing, and I'll talk to you soon.